Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Addiction and the Three Principles. My name is Greg Suki. I'm here with my cohort, Harry Davitsky. And today we're going to be talking about the spiritual innocence of anger and resentment, and really kind of getting into what they are and really kind of what the difference is between the two. But most importantly, I'll just get into what I see, with anger and resentment is, to me, first of all, the biggest difference between the two is that anger happens in the moment and is completely non-harmful. It's just an emotion that comes with a thought that comes from an experience that you're having. Somebody does something that irritates you and you get a little angry, and it just happens naturally. But when we hold on to that anger and then we decide that that's a horrible person and we should hate them and we should be angry at them for a long time, it becomes a resentment. And when you carry a resentment around with you, it creates feelings of illness. It can actually create physical illness and symptoms of diseases that don't actually even exist, because it's a lot of stress on our mind and on our bodies to hold that kind of feeling all the time. And another difference to me that I see is that anger isn't necessarily a choice. Sometimes it just pops up and it happens, and it seems to be out of our control, whereas resentment is a choice. It is absolutely 100% my choice if I want to stay angry at somebody, and if I want to, every time I see them, I want to remember what they did to me and be angry again and never forgive them and never move on. And I don't know, so I hear a lot of people saying bad things about anger, but anger itself, I don't believe is bad. What do you think, Harry?
Well, first let me talk a little bit, and then that's a good question. One of the things here with this group and this topic is we want to have a group discussion rather than just, and so I've asked, after I talk, I've asked Thomas to say a few words about the topic, and also Marina. And all that is a purpose is to get a group discussion going, because if you want to share, if you want to grow, you share. And one of the things in this casual environment is we have this opportunity where if you voice something, you'll grow from it. It always happens. It spurs that type of thing. Now, the reason I chose spiritual innocence for on anger and resentment is because a couple of weeks ago, Bill was on the show, Dr. William Pettit, and he talked a lot about psychological innocence. And then he mentioned one, spiritual innocence, and all of a sudden my head popped off like a cork, and I realized Sid never once that I know of, now it might not be true, but never once talked about psychological innocence. He talked a lot about innocence, and what he was implying was because he talks about the spiritual side of life, which would be 90% of what he talked about, and maybe 5 or 10% the psychological. He talked about innocence from a spiritual perspective, and I suddenly realized they're different. And in the spiritual innocence, that's where all the understanding comes, because you're experiencing it because you are it. And within that, you are it. When Sid was going through all his suffering at the end of his life, he was going through a tremendous amount, but he stayed within the spiritual innocence of his experience, and he saw that it was divine. He saw that it was something that was happening. He knew he was going to die a year before he died. He started to put things into place to understand that. But he wasn't sad. He wasn't caught up in that it was a situation that would demoralize him. He saw it as he was in spiritual innocence. And that's the state of mind I think he experiences enlightenment. He never really expected to be enlightened, but all of a sudden someone said something, and in the spiritual innocence of the moment, he experienced something very, very special. And he continually talked about the spiritual side of life, but he was emphasizing that everything is innocent. Greg talks a lot about that. And Greg has actually a fairly good understanding about the word innocence, you know, because he explains things often from that perspective. And I thought what I would do within regards to that, I would give a quote from Elsie Spittle. Elsie kind of epitomizes to me the spiritual side of the principles. And she's going around everywhere, and she's trying to lift people into an understanding that when Sid was talking on Salt Spring, he was talking about the spiritual side of the reality and the spiritual innocence. And when you experience that, and what I see that as is you are it. Rather than I'm doing things to get better, it's a good technique to do things like this, I should see things from psychological innocence, and I do. It's just you are it. And then the anger and the resentment just aren't there. And so I'm going to read this quote as a definition of what I see as what spiritual innocence is. This is from Elsie's blog. And I have a lot of respect for Elsie. And she's a very cool lady. However, for me, what feels the most powerful, deepest learning is that consciousness is our awareness that we are form and formless. We are spiritual beings living in the physical form. This is our life's education, learning how to honor our spiritual nature whilst living in our human form, and honoring our human nature as an expression of our spiritual essence via thought. This is gold for me. That to me is what spiritual innocence is. And when you understand that and experience that, the anger and the grief are not there. Obviously, when you're sitting in a state of love and understanding, it's very, very easy not to be angry and grief. So I'm going to turn it over now to Thomas to say a few words. But one thing, Greg, I do not agree with you. Anger in my life, has caused a lot of destruction. And it was when I had a spiritual insight into it and got rid of it, I saw the stupidity of what I was doing. It was hurting me. And to be honest, it destroyed my marriage. So I don't think it was really a very useful tool that I had. And to be honest, again, one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given is the losing of my anger. Not totally, of course, but primarily. And when my daughter talks about how it was with me when she was younger, her husband can't believe they're talking about the same person. He says, that doesn't make any sense. You're so relaxed. You never show anger, and etc. But after I had this spiritual innocence, this experience with anger, I not only didn't have to forgive myself, I simply saw that it was a stupid way to be. And I had learned it from my dad. Yeah. And that was innocent. He had a nice temper. He was a really nice guy, but he had a big temper. And I learned it, and then I thought it was fine, but it wasn't fine. And resentment, I do agree with you. Oh, that's a brutal thing, resentment. So within that context, Thomas is just, I think, listened to Elsie in London, and he's kind enough to come on the show. So maybe I used a quote of Elsie's. Maybe you could say a few words, Thomas. And we want to have a real good discussion about this wonderful topic.
Yeah, so I have everybody muted just to keep down on background noise. So if you have something to share, please feel free to unmute yourself or go to the participants tab and click on the raise hand button, and we'll get you on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Actually, I'm sorry to say this, but I forgot about your task for me. Anyway, I knew it was important to show up, so I'm here. I went to Elsie as well.
What did she emphasize?
She sort of gives me a good feeling. She's points to, for me, she points to that the important thing, the thing is really to see that we are, even if we feel that we are suffering, we don't suffer all of the time. And we have experiences in our suffering whenever we experience life that is beautiful. However we consider our status, what our feeling in the body is or whatever, stay in that feeling when life gets through and see more of what comes out of that. She said one thing that stuck with me and gave me something. I don't know if you hear anything. The spiritual informs the psychological.
Oh, perfect.
That was bam. Gives me goosebumps.
Me too.
And yeah, I'm still sitting with it. I came like 10 minutes ago from the talk. So the spiritual informs the psychological. That our soul, the untouched of human experience, that the thing that we are, comes in form and tells us. Our feelings tells us something. And that's, for me, is to experience that opportunity that life offers us. It's a gift. It's something offered from life, given to us to see more of. It's like a movie that's just going on, trying to be fun all the time. It's not giving me the depth and the reality and I don't know where I'm going with this, but it gave me a lot. It's like seeing life for what it is and all the gifts that surround us all the time.
That's perfect. That's spiritual innocence. Mm-hmm. We're always innocent. We all live in the spiritual world, and you are it. You know, that's the big message, the difference between the spiritual and the psychological. Psychological is pointing to the form and the answers in the form. The spiritual is pointing to the formless and the form, and as an expression of who and what you are.
And we are learning ourselves all the time. We are self-learning in action. Actually, we are the 3 principles in action.
That's Sid's message. And Elsie knows it. She lives it. She's very, very mystical. Very mystical. I love Elsie because she looks plain Jane, but she isn't.
Thank you.
Okay. Marina?
Hi. I don't really know what to say, but what I am seeing from what I'm hearing from you guys if the psychological innocence points to the experience of thought in the moment, then the spiritual experience that points to both the formless and the form must be about the experience of feeling in the moment. And I remember, and I don't know if you've heard this, Harry, or maybe the person that said it to me was fooling me, but I've often heard that the Native Americans talked about feelings as companions.
Sorry, I missed that.
That they talked about feelings as companions that were with you for a little while. They walked the path with you for a little while. So they never said, I am angry. They always said, I am with anger. But it was always an outside entity that was informing me of the moment and the path that I was crossing at that exact time, so that it never became me and it never became mine. And when I heard you say her, my anger, I don't think it is ever ours. I think it is spirit talking to us. I think it is spirit informing us of how we are buying into whatever is apparently going on, which is not real, but it is informing us about it different depths, just like Thomas was saying. When anger is there, when sadness is there, when resentment is there. To me, that is the one red flag that goes up and says, you're buying into it. There is more depth here and you are not seeing it. There is love here too, even though you cannot see it yet. There is something to be seen. And so whenever those red flags come up, it's a call for attention, for a deeper form of attention, a more radical form of attention. And you know how Rumi said that we are not here to find love, we are just here to find the walls that we have built against it and tear them down? Well, those red flags are the ones that tell me where the walls are. Because I don't know where the walls are until I bump into them. And when I bumped into them, it comes in the form of a feeling. And then spirit is informing me about both the formless and the form and how I'm getting lost in it. And there is more depth in there. So to me, spiritual innocence definitely talks about how I am not what I am feeling. And what I am feeling has no control or power over me unless I make it have power over me. It's not even an allowing. It's an actual act of power, using the power of that. It's the paradox again. You see?
One of the things that I love what you're saying, as I looked at this topic really hit me. I really learned a tremendous amount before the show started, was that spiritual innocence, and you've alluded to, one of the gifts that Sid gave us was that we can doctor ourselves. That's the gift of the three principles, or really not, I don't call them three principles, the gift of truth. The gift of truth allows us to doctor ourselves. And that's the greatest gift in the universe, is that it is true, as in our human form, we have these walls, as you expressed, built up. And whether it's painful or pleasurable, we want to get rid of those. Those are really limiting our experience here in the moment, in the now, and our human potential and our spiritual potential. So I love that. One of the things I said, oh, look at this spiritual innocence. It doesn't matter if, and Greg has talked a lot about it doesn't matter that I've done all this stuff. As long as I break those walls, then it frees me to be that new person. Because I don't know about you, Marina, but the most important thing to me is not that people like me or that I have a lot of status and stuff like that. I just want to have a good feeling. If I have a good spiritual feeling inside, that's worth 1,000,000 times more than all of that other stuff. That's, And so we self-doctor ourselves back to that light because it's the only thing that feels free, feels joy.
Absolutely. And you know, those this concept that, you know, we all have blind spots. And how do you know where the blind spots are? You know, everybody keeps telling you, look for your blind spots. And you never see them because, of course, they're blind. But you feel them when you bump into them. And when you feel anger and when you feel resentment and when you feel sadness, it's because you're bumping into one of those huge blind spots. But all the information is there. And the blind spots, you know, they're like leprechauns. They just want to hide. They don't like being found out. So the minute you find them, it's like you stare them in the face and they just become undone.
Yeah, you see. Once you see it, Sid, that's the Sid's talking. Seeing and seeing, you know.
There
once,
you go.
Once you see it.
And those walls that we build are totally out of innocence too. We're building those walls to try to protect ourselves from something that appears to be outside of us. But what we don't realize is that walls don't just keep things out, they keep things in. And Harry, I think that's part of what you were talking about when you say, you know, anger ended your marriage. I think it was more of the holding on to the anger, because that's what makes us fly off the handle when something little happens. It's not the anger in the moment, it's that resentment that we built over time toward that person or that idea, or we got it from our parents and just decided to carry on with it. So when something little happens, then it's a big explosion, because we built that wall and we're holding in all that anger. That's a beautiful example for resentment. It's like building that wall and holding in all the anger. And when you break down that wall, you're just left with the anger in the moment. And the anger in the moment is so much easier to deal with than all the anger built up over your entire life.
What do you think about that, Scott, what he just said? You have to unmute yourself.
I got you. You're unmuted.
No, he's still muted, Greg.
I'm clicking it. It's not happening.
Scott, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
I did. I think I hit the wrong button. No, my comment is, and I try to keep things as simple as possible. In your life, you have negative feelings and you have positive feelings. And a negative feeling in any situation should put up a red flag like that lady was talking about, okay? And I'm grouping all of them in. So let's say that I'm out in the forest and all of a sudden I come across a snake. Now, I don't know if it's poison or not. Red flag comes up and the fear comes to me, right? Now, the fear says that there's something that isn't right I'm seeing in my thinking. Hold on just a second. A lot of times it's faster if I have to react. But if I see that, then I'll know how to react. So I'm really glad I have that fear. Now, if I carry that fear on and I'm afraid of any little snake or whatnot, then I've kind of lost what it's, you know, what it's meant for or what it's staged for. And this used to happen with my association with people at work and whatnot. You know, I'd get angry at them. They weren't doing this and that. But I started to realize the only control that I have is over myself. So any kind of negative feeling is sort of a red flag coming up. Roger told me this, Roger Mills, and I've said it on other talk show things that I really liked. He said, and this had to do with solving a problem. He said, if getting over the mountain is the problem and you focus too much in on the problem, you'll miss the path that goes around it. It was so profound for me, so profound. Because, you know, I would run into things and situations and I just knew that I had to back off. The red flag was up. Yeah, I had every right. I mean, I could go to my friends and they'd say, oh, no, you should be mad at them. You shouldn't put up with that. You know, they're there to, but that wasn't getting what I wanted, because the only control I had was on myself. So when my behavior started to change in relationship, and this had to do with work, my relationship with this person who was the biggest pain in the butt as I saw it before changed completely. In fact, this person almost became, but was one particular, they kind of was like on my side. I couldn't believe this, you know, after some things that this person has said. So any kind of a negative feeling or whatnot, there's something that's going on in your head that isn't panning out the way that you want it to. And I think it should give you pause just to step back a little bit and see about looking at that situation. The consciousness goes up. I don't want to get, too intellectual. Sometimes I feel like I like the spiritual part of it, but you got to get into the intellect. For me, so it gives me a great comfort that way, is what I'm saying, under any situation. And I've been in emergency situations. I've been fortunate to save 3 people's lives, which was an incredible thing. But boy, I had to step back from what I was seeing, as the problem. Anyway.
Well, and sometimes it's not just the snakes we're afraid of, it's a stick that looks like a snake. Sometimes it's not even a snake that we're really afraid of, it's a stick that looks like a snake, or a piece of rope or something else that isn't even related. And yet we can still have those same feelings from it. And that's, to me, that's one of the big dangers of resentment, of not letting go of what somebody's done to you that you feel wronged about, is that anything else that looks like it becomes instant anger. Mm-hmm. Anybody that looks like a snake, so to speak, suddenly brings up those same feelings. And it seems absolutely real in the moment.
But the saving grace is that when you realize that, then that's something, for lack of a better word, you work on yourselves, okay? There are certain situations where I still kind of get nervous and stuff. And then I got to watch it because the guy in my head says, well, Scott, you're supposed to know this. You've been doing this for years. I love that guy when he pops up. I'd love to strangle him. But these are just the things that you, so I know that it is my thinking, and then I deal with it, in a fashion that's always come out certainly better or positive than it wouldn't have prior to that. And that's many situations, many things that can set me off at one time. But I just, I step back and once in a while, I have to admit, I do get caught, but it only lasts for a second. I'm not ruminating, Now I am curious of what's happened in the past in certain things, but that's a little bit different, a little different subject. So
that's the beauty of the spiritual innocence, Scott, is you naturally go to a lighter feeling. Mm. When you step into, if you are spiritual by nature, you naturally will head towards a lighter feeling. Mm-hmm. One of the things that has struck me in my life is I had a very deep insight on Salt Spring Island. And then for 40 years, I plugged along. And I wondered why at one point everything fell into place after 40 years. That's a long time, Scott. No, some people are slow, but I think I was the king of slow. But, but what happened, when I look back, what I noticed is because the insight that I had was so spiritual, I just couldn't give up. I had to keep going. I kept going for the light and the lighter feeling because the spiritual is brings all of that there, and I knew I had to keep heading in that direction. And then my spiritual innocence surprised myself because I fell into a deeper level. And then everything, my understanding of life became, where I had an intellectual concept, became a spiritual concept. And that was very, very powerful. That's why the spiritual is so beautiful, is because it actually is lighter. It doesn't, the more spiritual you are, the less anger and resentment. But you do have resentment and you do have anger, but you push it away because it doesn't have the love that you.
Also judgment is a tough one too. You get a little bit judgmental, when you see things and or somebody you think that should know better and you don't. You can get sort of caught up in that. But there's no doubt about it. I think once you're really caught on it, you really can't go back. I mean, you can slip, But I think it would be very hard to go back to the way, say, a person started off with, super anger. Your consciousness certainly has gone up, maybe not as far. And I've known people whose consciousness has gone up so far. They were my teacher at the beginning, but they sort of tapered off and saw it in a less spiritual way, Harry. I think this is why I enjoy what you talk about, because I like the spiritual aspect, even though in a sense that can be a little difficult talking about, but you're talking about the great nothingness, and that's amazing, but I love it. I'm so comfortable with the great nothingness, that's there. So anyway, that's what I feel about that.
Janelle
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, Janelle works with the homeless. And I would imagine, Janelle, you would hear a lot about anger and resentment. I certainly hear a lot of it working with the heavily addicted. The outside world, the anger and resentment that they have towards their life. How does that, what we're talking about, fit into working with the homeless people? Oh, good.
Just unmuted. Harry, it's the funniest thing because they're no different. It makes no difference. They are human beings exactly like we are, creating an experience of life through their thinking, not realizing or I guess forgetting in some way who they are at the core of their being. And that's universal, so what I see them experiencing is really no different than everybody else. It's just for them, the circumstances are more extreme, so they come from very abusive relationships, or they have no resources around to help them. But when any of them in any way gets a little glimpse of what you've been pointing to about getting in touch with that feeling of who they are at the core of their being, who they are separate from the craziness that exists in their heads, then they somehow wake up, and that somehow gives them access to whatever they need in the moment to make the next step, or have an insight to not punch somebody in the face. Maybe that's not a good idea. I had a girl who had a very violent upbringing, and because of that ended up being very violent herself. And she used to be very envious of other people and wanted their things. And one of the ways that she did it was she would take a pool ball, like when you're playing pool, 8-ball or whatever, and put it inside a sock. And she'd go and hit people with it, like beat them up with it, to be able to get their things. And she just had an insight one day, that, and we have no idea how it came, but somehow it came, where she realized, oh, this isn't good, this thing that I do. And she didn't want to be that way anymore. And so she ended up kind of turning her life around. And just somehow she got into touch with what you're pointing to. That's something that's inside of us that nobody can describe, the nothingness that we're all a part of. And it's there for us to see anytime.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Joe. That's awesome.
And my God, nowadays it's so funny because I have to tell you a funny story about her. She was at AA and going through meetings, and one of the things that you're supposed to do is go and apologize to the people you have harmed. And so she tried to go do it, but she couldn't do it because every time she went up to someone to apologize, they were afraid she was going to beat the crap out of them, so they would all run away. So she couldn't do it, but it's just so funny. Like, she saw the humor in it, you know? Anyway.
That's funny.
She continues to make my laugh. She's an amazing lady and a bountiful personality of lots of fun and laughter, and yeah.
That's great. Well, we have a few people with hands up. Chris Noonan was next, and then Yvonne, and then Tanya.
Thank you. When you talked, Harry, about the anger you had in your previous marriage, I could remember having that kind of anger, almost chronic anger, earlier in my life. And I think one of the things that I realized, I heard someone say once, that really hit me. Someone say that anger is all about feeling that something is being taken away from you.
Mm.
Yeah, that's something that can make you feel worse, or something from outside of you can make you, you know, something can be taken away. So the anger is in a way that what it points to, I think, is that somehow or another I wasn't feeling like a whole. I wasn't connected to my soul. So as I feel today, I'm connected to my soul. It's, anger it's just like it's very light, and I don't at all go where I used to go. I used to have cramps here in my, biting my teeth together, and and now I'm more like, yeah. I don't really see it. Doesn't have to be my problem. So it's such an amazing, beautiful thing not to have this anger going in my system, and just being more relaxed about everything, really. I'm not saying that it's not possible for me to be angry, but it's very short-lived, and it doesn't really have this. I don't have, because the more angry you get into hate and resentment, and this really heavy stuff, and or turn the anger against yourself, which would be kind of self-destructive behaviors. So I just feel that I found my peace with God, whatever, that it's okay. Life is okay, and even when it isn't. So because and it's absolutely, life is like there's this Chinese saying. I'll just end. I love this Chinese saying that between what is heaven, what is hell. Well, they have these people sitting with chopsticks and a wonderful table with all food and drink and everything you could possibly love, and hell is everyone has got too long. They've got so long chopsticks that they can't get the food into their mouth. And heaven is, you've understood that you have to give the guy opposite you some food, because you can do that with a long chopstick, and the other way around. So you start interacting and being in connection with your world, and seeing the helpfulness, and being loving, instead of just focusing on yourself, because that's what happens. And I think the overemphasizing yourself and your ego and your importance is a kind of the root cause of a lot of negative when anger is negative. I think that's of course, I also think in a way sometimes anger can be, well, like, kind of get off your butt and do something about your life. So I'm just saying I don't want to do this anymore. Sometimes there can also be a call to action, and that could be spiritual, I guess, saying, well, this is too much now. Something is too much. Yeah.
Yeah. It does work a lot better when we help each other out, but really seeing the innocence in everybody.
Yeah, that
So,
we just see it together. We're on this journey together, and we could just as well, be nice.
and even when we're not, it's okay.
Yeah.
For that, there's an innocence to it. There really is. We're dealing with the thinking we have in the moment. We're doing the best we can with it. And chances are, if I were in the same, line of thought that the other person were in, I might have reacted the same way.
Yeah.
So it's really helped out quite a bit with my relationships with other people, just seeing that innocence in everybody. And the day that I saw that, it completely changed my life. It's like, wow, that person's not an a-hole. They're just stuck in their thinking. And they're responding likewise. That's how the system works.
Yeah.
What I like, Greg, about spiritual innocence is spiritual really means innocence in yourself. And it's easy to see how innocence works with other people, because it's obvious that other people have different levels of consciousness. But to have innocence for yourself, that's where the grace is, and the softness and the gentleness and the no thinking is. Innocence for yourself is a non-thinking process. And I love when I don't think about what's driving, because I notice if I'm thinking about it, well, the rest of that story, eh? Yeah, So
let's talk about the innocence of everybody, including yourself.
Yes,
because we're all connected anyway. We're all one anyway. So if you truly see innocence, you see it for everybody, especially for yourself. But we can't really see it for ourselves without seeing it for others too, in my experience, because we are connected. There is no separation between us except that we think there is. There's that illusion of it. But in reality, we can't harm each other without harming ourselves, and we can't love each other without loving ourselves. It's all connected. And that's that thing, some people call it karma. There's all kinds of different ways that people explain that, but we really can't do anything to ourselves without doing it to somebody else, and we can't do it to somebody else without doing it to ourselves.
One of the things that has struck me when you were talking, Chris, was your explanation of anger is totally different than my own experience. And I heard someone else talk about it. I'm starting to think that we all have a personal interpretation of what anger is, and we're all got a different one. That's quite a shock to me. I thought we would have the same. But your interpretation of anger, which made total sense, by the way, Chris, is nothing compared to what I think of it. And so I think we're creating an image within ourselves that we think is universal, and it's a personal opinion. And that's innocence for sure. I guess I'm dumber than I thought. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Harry, I had that experience with my husband because I remember when we would have our conversations after I came across the 3 principles, and he would share, or I would be talking about all the fears that I'd had throughout my life and how they had driven my behaviors, and I wouldn't do things because I was afraid to do it. And so I said, it's just so nice to know that those fears aren't real. And so I said, well, what fears have you had? And he goes, well, I don't have any fear. And I said, well, what are you talking about? You don't have fear. And he said, well, I just don't have fear. I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, I know that you don't like to go into a room of people and have to make conversation with people you don't know. And I know you don't like returning stuff to the store or whatever it is, or sending a meal back at a restaurant, for fear of the conflict or whatever. And he says, well, that's not fear. That's just stuff I don't want to do. And I realized, oh my God, everything we think is not the same. We're not talking the same language. We don't have the same perception of anything. So here I've made up this story that all these things that I didn't want to do were fears. I labeled them, those are fears. And he just labeled them as stuff I don't want to do.
I like his definition better.
I know, me too. Me too.
Yeah. That is interesting. We're all living in a separate reality with separate interpretations. I didn't, honestly, before this talk, I didn't understand that. Totally didn't understand that. It's very, very interesting.
That's why it's good to talk about this stuff, so we can hear what other people think of it too. As long as I walk around with my own definition of it, I'll never know what other people think of it.
Yeah.
And we have, Yvonne has his hand up. You are, I don't know, it's not letting me unmute people today. So you have to unmute yourself.
You are not trusted. Hi, guys.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. And about this anger thing, I think we all can agree that we can't experience anything without thinking. And the gift of thinking was given us at birth. That we can think. And then came our personal thinking, making us believe the illusions we are creating by thinking. Making us believe that we are separated from each other and separated from everything. And that is an illusion until we realize that we are the thinkers in our lives. And if I am the thinker in my life, everybody else is the thinker in his life. And we have our separate realities. And there is no need to punch anyone on the nose for his reality, that mine is better than his. And there is no need to put any label on the feeling of anger. It is anger. Point. Period. It's a thought, created by thought. It's all thought. And putting a label, good or bad, is creating separation. And that is an illusion. So to me, seeing that my gift of thought is sometimes in my personal thinking creating this illusion, separation, is mind-blowing. Because we get connected. In the absence of that separation, we are all connected. There is no need for putting labels on feelings. It's just feelings. And we have the power to decide where to go with that feeling. When we see that I'm creating it from within. It's coming through me, not to me.
It just reminded me, Joe Bailey said in his book, The Serenity Principle, he said that serenity and peace of mind are a natural state of being when we stop doing the things that take us away from it.
Yes, he's so.
And that it struck me when I read that the first time. I said, "Wow, that just it made sense deep inside. It's like, that's true. The moments when I get caught up in a beautiful sunset, or, I see, just something that kind of distracts me away from whatever I had going on up in here, suddenly I'm at peace. I don't have to do anything to get there.
No.
I just stopped doing the things that took me away from it, and I'm there.
Yeah.
That's the definition of spiritual innocence, Greg. That's actually the definition.
At least it's your definition, Harry.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That's my definition. Yeah. Who's the teacher?
The dictionary according to Harry, the dictionary according to Craig. Okay.
Do we have another someone? You mentioned a third person to talk.
Yeah, Tanya, actually, because I have seen an amazing transformation in her. I'll let her tell her story, but she was pretty angry when I first when I first met her. So, and obviously she's not so angry now. So let's hear what happened.
I wasn't that angry, Greg.
Sure.
I'm trying to be brief. The reason I was angry, felt angry when I came to you with lots of questions. I came from being submerged in the AA world for almost 10 years, and so I thought I knew. I thought I knew stuff. I thought I knew, there was, I would never bash AA. It did wonders for me. It got me to where I needed to get to. But there was a lot of outside-in messages, and I have to do this in order to feel happy. I have to make my amends in order to be free of this guilt and shame. I have to. So it was a very action-based program. But with that being said, when I came to you, I had all these questions, and I was angry because I was like, well, I feel like I've been brainwashed, and I feel like, brainwashed. But then when I actually got to talk to you, and I got to talk to Harry a little bit, and I got to talk to other people in this, within these types of groups that are familiar with the Big Book, the spiritual principles got lost along the way in AA, because there are pointers to the truth within Alcoholics Anonymous and in the Big Book, and it talks about the inner resource, tapping in, being rocketed into a fourth dimension. I mean, there's terms that all of a sudden were like, I've read those 100 times, but it didn't really resonate with me until coming across the three principles, which so I was angry because I felt like I've been like almost 10 years of like the wrong way, but it really wasn't the wrong. It was it was a pointer, just wasn't the main pointer, the end pointer, if you will. So once I realized that I had this thing in me that was truth, and that the only real thing is love, and anything other than that is really, a lot of it is false reality created through my thinking. Things just melted away. Things just started to melt away. Things that I would hold on to just kind of, I like the analogy of Jeff Foster. Talks about, you're thinking like being like birds singing, or you're thinking being like children knocking at the door, or your feelings, and just allow them in, they're all part of my human experience. It's not bad. It's not, I don't have to run away from it. I don't have to try to take something to cover it up, or, sometimes I still get caught up in it, and I'll go for a run, or I'll work out, or I'll do something because I know it'll get me back into the moment, which is the truth. But the main point for me was just, it's in me, it's in everybody, that truth, that love, and that's the only real thing. And so when I get caught up, the only thing these days that I really get angry at is my 18-year-old son that doesn't clean his room or do what I want him to do. And so that's really personal sometimes. It feels like he's doing it to me. Now, I raised him. He should know better. But I quickly get, no, he's his own person. He has wisdom inside him. He will figure it out. But that's, you know, but these days that's really the only time I really get caught up because we're really close, right? He's my son. It's a little bit, you know, closer than somebody at work that pisses me off. My son, I take it a little more personally, and it's just, I don't know, it's just how it is. But yeah, I was angry because I was confused, and I was trying to figure stuff out, and now I don't have to figure anything out. It's all there. It's here, each moment. And what a piece, like that's where I get that sort of like I can come back to at any time because it's always there. It's unbreakable. It's unshakable. No one can take it from me. I don't have to do anything to get it. So that to me, I'm very grateful and feel blessed that I was open-minded enough to kind of seek truth more so than in just the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because again, it's great, but I need this helped me to really find it, if you will.
Do you feel that you fluked it a bit?
Sorry?
Like I feel like I fluked it a bit. Do you feel like you fluked it a bit?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
What do you mean by fluked, Harry? Because I don't think that's a word that everybody uses.
It just, you know, Dickens used the word you fall into it.
I just believe I was open enough to just living, just open enough to hear the truth, to hear it, to experience. I don't know. I don't even know how I came across Greg. Really? Oh no, it was a post that I read through. Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But yeah.
It's because we're all connected.
That's right. Okay, good. There's the answer.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sonny. It's been really awesome getting to know you and seeing that transformation. Not that you were like some evil person or something before. I don't want to put it across like that. Like she was like going out and shooting children and small kittens and stuff. But just she was just confused and upset about being what looked like misled. You know, and we're all misled at times. We all fall into it. We all have our groups of people that we put trust in, and sometimes they don't always, you know, we're all human, so sometimes they don't have the right answer. It kind of helps steer us off path a little bit, but it happens. There's an innocence to all of that. But the beautiful thing about it is we don't have to wait for them to change for us to get better. We don't have to wait for anybody around us to have a better attitude toward life, to be less angry or resentful, for us to be less angry and resentful. And when you really look at the core of the vast majority of anger and resentment comes from expectations. It's from somebody or something not living up to an expectation that we created in our own heads for them. So it's all self-created. It's not even about what the other person did. It's about what we expected them to do.
And we remember the feeling of it. My mother had a best friend for 25 years. They were inseparable. Then they had a fight. And then for 10 more years, they never talked to each other. And then they accidentally met each other again and found out that they were still best friends and loved each other. So I was sitting on the front steps with my mother, and I said, "Ma, what disturbed you that got you so upset about Mona?" And she said, "I don't know. I forgot." She remembered the feeling, didn't remember the reason why she was angry. And I thought, that is so ironical. You hold on to this feeling that you can't even remember what created the feeling. That doesn't make sense on one level. And yet, of course, with our understanding, it does make a lot of sense. And, you know, my mother was not a person to hold on to grudges, but I guess she was the type of person, when she did, she wouldn't let it go, you know, type of things. So, yeah, resentment is a tough one. There's no doubt about it. Well,
Definitely is. But how this all really ties in with addiction, though, is, you know, why we're talking about this, is that nobody ever develops that habitual thought pattern that creates an addiction except for the reason of wanting to feel better. That's all that we ever use these outside things for, is that we want to feel better inside. And what we want to point at with this, with the spiritual and psychological innocence, is that it's always okay inside, as long as we learn to let go of what we think is going on. Because it's always what we think is going on that creates our experience. Every single time, there is no exception to that. And just understanding that right there will help you feel better. It really does. It helped me tremendously. Just knowing that I was creating my own experience, that every time I got upset or was disappointed or any of those feelings we like to call bad, they're just uncomfortable, they're not bad. I created it, which means I can get rid of it. To me, that's the hope to it. When I create something that I don't like, guess what? I created it. So I don't have to wait for someone else to change for it to go away. Because I'm holding it, I created it, and it's me. Did you have anything else to add, Harry?
Well, one of the reasons Greg and I started this room was I wanted to get a deeper understanding of the addiction bubble. I really felt that 3P on its present level is not quite approaching it totally, honestly. And Greg asked Joe Bailey in March to come in to talk, and I've been corresponding a bit with him. And the topic we came up with was how 3P, as taught by Sydney Banks, will revolutionize the treatment of addictions. That's going to be our, to me, that's the heart of why this room was initiated, was we don't want to just present the 3 principles at the level it is at right now. We want to get as close as we can as taught by Sydney Banks, and how we can revolutionize and create a system. And I felt, to be honest, that this talk today had a little bit of that in it, in the sense that we were looking at sort of a topic, an area. And I know for myself, obviously with separate realities, I had a little bit of a breakthrough with that. So that's the essence of the room. And when I see all the people participate, I saw how it shifted me away from this to all of us. And all of a sudden I felt that's when I experienced something. So this is the purpose of the room, is what we're doing here, is sharing and participating and trying to uncover these hidden areas that nobody is talking about in 3P, that areas where we can hear from different people. And the other thing I want to emphasize, a lot of us, I get a lot of opportunities, but a lot of us, it's very important to me to hear the people, not just the top people in the 3P movement. This is the heart of it right here. Us. We're the key to the reason. This is why Sid shared his message, not to have a few teachers. He wanted people like us to be able to have wisdom, to access that inner wisdom that Yvonne was talking about, if I'm pronouncing it right. I'm sorry if I'm not. And that we need to express it. We need to share it. And in this platform, not always, it allows for that type of thing. And in the Danish Zoom room that we did, we had a topic with Lars, Chris, and the topic was kids. So that was a very common topic. But the conversation rolled all along. And I don't understand Danish, but the feeling at the end of that room, at the end, it was so beautiful because everybody was sharing. And that to me is the epitome of what the three principles are. I love Elsie Thomas, like it's really great, but her message is it's in you. And you know that. We've been talking about that. Marina, the same thing. It's in Janelle, the beautiful way Janelle shared today. You know, it was, you could feel the lift. Chris, everybody, Tanya, everybody. It's Scott, and
Thomas.
Jeff. Yeah, showing up, fantastic. It's what I feel is needed out there. We're a room that's trying to supply a need that is not supplied by other people in the three principle movement. Not criticizing the three principles. We love, of course, that there's these people like Dickin and Elsie and Chip and so on. But we're the heart of the 3P. And it's to see us develop. It's us. I don't know about anybody else, but Harry Durbitsky's interested in Harry Durbitsky's life. You know, and he has dreams and aspirations. And as these dreams and aspirations come into fruit, it's like life kissing me on the lips and saying, I love you. And as a lover of life, Harry Durbitsky loves that, you know, as an image, so on. So I want to thank everybody for sharing and so on.
Yes, thank you so much. That's what makes this what it is. It's not me and Harry.
No.
If it were, we could just get together and just record the two of us bantering back and forth and everybody would be happy and whatever. But that's not what this is about. This isn't the Greg and Harry show. This is about everybody. And that's why we encourage everybody to participate. And it's so beautiful to hear what other people are experiencing. Because it is different in a way. It's all the same, really, at the core, but the way we explain it is different. And sometimes that little difference in words, that one little word change, makes all the difference for somebody else. And it's that thing that clicks in here and changes that intellectual into a spiritual understanding. That's what conversation is about with this, is we communicate our heart and soul to each other. And I've heard it said many, many times, what comes from the heart goes to the heart. So that's what we're doing here. We're sharing our hearts with each other, and we can't help but grow together. It's an amazing thing. But I love you all. I'm gonna unmute everybody so we can all say goodbye and thanks again to everybody who shared. Thomas, Marina, Scott, Chris, Yvonne, Janelle, Tanya. You guys are what makes this what it is.
Bye, guys.
Maybe I'll talk
Thanks,
next.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.